Hi, I am Andre Kempe, CEO at Admiral Media, and I want to thank you for joining. Welcome everyone to the second edition of our Masterclass Let's Talk Apps. This time with Ekaterina Gamsriegler and Arthur Joakim, who will dive deep into the world of growth loops and explore factors to consider for creative testing. Without further ado, let's talk apps.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea, for the very nice intro and the great welcome message. We have a lot to cover today, so I'm gonna dive right into the growth loops, and after that, Arthur will take over and talk about the creative optimization. A couple of words about myself. I've been in marketing and growth for more than a decade and have been covering a lot of different areas as an individual contributor for years. Currently, I lead marketing at Mimo and also advising startups on growth, run a course on Maven. I work a lot. And my biggest passion is bringing together marketing and product teams, which are traditionally siloed and sometimes even work against each other, and actually doing full funnel approach to marketing. So making sure that everything that gets in terms of revenue also gets out in terms of revenue. What are we going to cover today? I'm going to talk about the growth loops, why they are important and why they sometimes don't work, actually often rather than sometimes. I'll cover virality-based, content-based loops, and also the paid advertising loop, and how to fight the rising customer acquisition costs and how to approach it. And then again, Arthur will double down on that with his insights. So for those of you who might not be too familiar with the concept, growth loops have become a very popular topic and a framework that is substituting the traditional pirate funnel approach from awareness to revenue or retention. The difference here is that the output which you are getting from a loop is exactly the same as the input and can be reinvested, making the loop spin faster and better. It can be revenue, like for example, money from your subscriptions that you can reinvest into advertising. It can also be users from your referral programs when existing users invite new ones. And the beauty of growth loops and the reason why everybody would like to implement some is that when you implement them once, the output is scaling together with the growth of your product. And also it helps you to work together as teams on one target metric, maybe North Star metric, rather than have a siloed approach to growth. Now, time for a quick poll. What's your biggest challenge when it comes to implementing growth loops? You should be able to see the poll by now. Is it identifying key elements, measuring performance, integrating with the existing growth strategies, or getting the stakeholder buy-in? Please vote, and I'm super curious about the results. I have my anecdotal evidence of what people ask me most, but I'm really curious to know what's the main issues for the audience. Let's maybe spend 15 more seconds on that. And okay, the most popular answer is identifying the key elements of the growth loop. This is actually perfect because a lot of my presentation is about it. My personal question I get asked the most is about getting the shareholder buy-in. So I'm actually surprised to see it not being so relevant for the rest of you. And measuring the performance is the second place. Thanks a lot for participating. Super good to know. So let's start with the viral loops. Super straightforward. User installs the app, they want to share it, and they do. This is how it works in a perfect world. These kind of loops are fairly straightforward, like easy to implement and cost efficient. unless you are given a lot of money and have an incentivized referral program, which costs you a lot. Also, this also, like other loops, scales together with your user base. And there is not such an obvious benefit of this, is that referrals help you increase brand awareness, for example, if it's word of mouth. And also long-term, your conversion to purchase might increase as well, because the users who get invited by others might initially have a slightly higher level of trust towards the product. You might all be familiar with different variations of this kind of a loop. The most popular implementation for subscription apps is the referral scheme. They can be incentivized and non-incentivized. If it's incentivized, it's an extra like screen and kind of point in the flow, as you can see. And there are many optimization levers when it comes to the referral program. As I don't have too much time, I don't want to go into details about optimizing each of these levers, but you can, of course, always play around with copy and design, with timing, like when are you going to show and ask users to invite friends? Is it going to be right after they sign up? Are you that confident? Or are you going to ask them to invite friends after 3 days of using the app? Or maybe you want to invite them in order to get access to your pro subscription so that they experience the value. Touch points and recurrence. Make sure that you communicate the referral program through all the relevant channels. It can be email, it can be push notification or an in-app message. And also it's up to you to decide how often are you going to keep asking. I definitely recommend to ask more than once, but then to not maybe spend like remind users of this too often. So make sure to pick reasonable timeframes between asking again and again. The most important part of the referral program, where most of the experimentation is happening, is actually deciding what incentive you're going to offer to users. There are two big buckets of the incentives, one-sided and double-sided. One-sided means that you only reward the person who invites another user. Double-sided means that you reward both. And in my experience, the double-sided incentives work much better. But this is probably common sense. When we tested it, we saw about a 40% increase in the invite rate when we switched to double-sided invites. What to be careful with? Like you can reward users with discounts, money, and app currency, but in this case, you need to make sure that you are still have viable unit economics and that you don't actually spend more money on rewarding someone rather than you would spend on acquiring users from other channels. Also monitor the average revenue per paying user because such rewards can decrease it. Also, yeah, cannibalization. Of course, there will always be a percentage of users who would invite the others regardless of the incentive. The easiest way to measure it is to have a baseline before you start experimenting with the program and see how it changes after you start giving out money, for example. You can also reward users with the free premium version, give them access to different features and levels, or access to exclusive communities, events, merch, etc. So the most important thing here is to make sure that the reward you're offering is aligned with your user's goal. Because for different apps, users will have different goals. When we're playing casual games, we want to have fun. When you are using Uber, you want to get from one place to another in the maybe most efficient and cheapest way. When you are using educational apps, you want to learn efficiently. So in this way, offering a discount for a ride or offering access to a new hidden level or offering an access to the free version, like pro subscription, so that user can like learn most efficiently will depend on the app, right? And I'm actually curious now, Arthur, are there any incentives that maybe ever worked super good for you and made you invite others?
Actually, good question. Yeah, I mean, that is discount and money one that had worked really good for me. And that is the main incentive for me, to be honest, to be 100% honest, I mean, use the referral. Yeah, that's it.
Got it. Yeah, you might be pretty immune to those incentives by now if money is the only thing that works.
Yeah, that is the reason I've just told that, to be fully honest.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, and another interesting lever to play around with is the actual flow and how the user experience look like when they decide to share. You can have native models, you can offer all the possible sharing options, or you can pick maybe one or two of the most popular ones and then hide the others behind more or copying the link. What we tested at some point was the native model versus two most popular options. And we saw an 8% increase to invite rate on Android and 14% on iOS. I cannot tell you exactly why. My assumption is that with the native model, there is just a paradox of choice, and there are too many options that not everybody might quickly decide on. So once you leave the most popular ones, it worked much better for us. It might sound too simple and too good to be true. So there are some things to definitely keep in mind when experimenting with your viral growth loop. First, think whether it can become one of your main growth drivers, because this hugely depends on how niche the app is, what is your vertical, how likely are others to share your product, and how likely are they to have friends who will be equally interested in it. Because even doubling the K factor sometimes might not really become an important lever for you. If you decide to go for double-sided incentives, keep in mind that this might be a good lever for acquisition, but it might not be the best lever for monetization, because if you start offering the users free trials or money, then again, you should expect that not everybody is gonna buy them right away, in this case, in your product. And also keep in mind that the quality of the referred users might be lower than you expect. This might be because some folks decide to manipulate your program. They might invite themselves 100 times with different email addresses, etc. So to some extent, to prevent this, if you believe this might be an issue for you, you can set the maximum number of invites per user. We have 7, for example. What can you do tomorrow with this information? Before upselling it internally, before actually implementing it, I recommend you do some simple math and build a model with the assumptions of how different conversion rates are going to look at each step of the user flow. These scenarios you can split into realistic, optimistic, and pessimistic. And then once you have the first MVP or minimum viable test running, you can see how good the numbers match your previous assumptions. In my experience, things like percentage of users who share the invite or average number of invites per user are quite tricky to move. Keep this in mind and see really how realistic it will be for you to iterate on the success or failure. If you're collecting NPS, check how high it is as well, because it might happen that none of the users want to share your product with others to begin with. And this means you should work on the quality of your product first before maybe layering on some virality programs. Now, content loops. There are 4 types of the content loops. And what you see on the right side are the company distributed content loops, which in my experience work best for the web-based products. So all these typical success stories that you hear about Pinterest or Quora, is exactly this. The content gets created by company or user, but then gets distributed through content marketing or search engine optimization. What might work for apps is rather user-distributed content, whether also created by the company or the user. For example, if you have an app with a catalog of different products, you can simply add one sharing button in the top, as you can see here in the top right corner, and see what happens. How likely is the content of your app to get shared? I think this is a very popular implementation, and pretty much every app has it at this point. Another loop to mention, which is not so common, is has a very long, complicated name. It's a social viral acquisition loop powered by company-generated user-distributed content. But it's much more simple than what it sounds. The way it works is that user installs the app, they come across some screen they want to share, they do it, the shared screen gets exposure, typically on social media, and this drives other users to your app. Mimo app, for example, has a lot of gamification elements or habit building elements. We have the streaks, we have leaderboards with users moving up and down to different leagues. We have the summary of the progress. So these are typically the screens that have a lot of exposure and that users might also want to share. So at some point we started testing this approach and layered up different sharing options for different screens. And here you can see the up and to the right kind of graph, but this covers like all the different use cases that we experimented with. This, what you see on the graph is the amount of shares that the different screens were getting. What you can do with this information, answer a couple of questions. Is the content that can be shared created as a part of usage? Is there anything in the app that users can work on and that they are proud of that they will be willing to share on social media? Again, it's much easier for apps that have some gamification or competition elements built in. How simple is the sharing process? Ideally, it should be just a couple of clicks. And then when you test it, check how the users who share the content on social media different from those who don't. When I was implementing this feature, I did not A/B test it. We just rolled it out. So then you could see the correlation versus causation issue, because you can see that the retention for users who share the content on social media is 3 times higher, for example, than the average user base. And same with monetization and some other target metrics. But you also should keep in mind in this case that you don't know why, if you do not A/B test it, like why exactly are they more willing to retain better or monetize better? Is it because they have shared the content on social media and became very publicly committed to using the product, or have they been committed to begin with? Is this your super power users to begin with, and this is the reason why they shared the content on social media, and you just tend to mix the two. So yeah, it would be, I don't know the answer, but it would be super interesting to know how it works for others if somebody A/B tested something like this. And the last part of my presentation before Arthur takes over is the paid acquisition loop, which is the most probably common loop that all of you are using, or a decent portion might be using. This is how it looks for mobile apps. You can ignore the right part because this is covering the organic uplift, but the way it works is you invest into paid advertising, users install the app, they purchase a subscription, hopefully, or generate revenue in other ways, and you reinvest this into advertising. What's very common is that the question that I receive very often is, what do I do if my customer acquisition cost increased? What do I do if the payback period got longer? I'm lost. Like, what do I fix? My number one advice is to start with some growth diagnostics and to see whether it's just seasonality. For this, if you're monitoring your year-over-year conversions, you should be able to check if it matches the previous years. Then check if there are other external factors that might have impacted higher customer acquisition cost. For example, an aggressive competitor entering the market, maybe industry changes like rolling out Cascade network. Then switch to acquisition kind of questions and look at the denominator of your conversion rate, so which will be downloads. Has the quantity of the downloads changed? Maybe you got featured, maybe you scaled up or down the channels. How is the quality of the users? Maybe you disabled some very well-performing high quality channel or tested something completely new. And most importantly, see if the trends are universal across different countries, user motives, and other user properties to see if there's maybe just one segment of users that is dragging down the whole metric. After this, if you still have not found the reason, look into the product changes, the experiments that the other teams might have been running, what has been changed in onboarding flow, payables. Maybe somebody forgot to add an event tracking to a purchase button or trial start button. This really happens a lot, very often. So yeah, make sure your analytics tracking and event reporting is good. If it's none of this and your growth diagnostics went good, you still think that your customer acquisition cost is way too high, take a look at your whole funnel. Here on the right, you can see an example of how it can look like from ad impression to renewal. So your main goal here is to figure out what are the metrics you should focus on fixing. Typically, everybody wants to have a lower customer acquisition cost or shorter payback period and a higher lifetime value so that you can afford and have like a little bit of a cushion for rising customer acquisition costs in the future. You can see in purple different metrics that are associated with each step of the funnel. And I would think that by now you might know where you might already know where you have the bottlenecks and what are the metrics that you can work on. If you're thinking about LTV/CAC ratio, also the problem here is that it's a lagging indicator, so you might not always predict it after a couple of days or weeks of running the campaigns. In this case, one of the frameworks that is super useful is a hierarchy of metrics, which means you break down your target metric and up till the level that you have the metrics that you can actually impact. In case of with customer acquisition costs, this would be click-through rates, trial to purchase rate, paywall impression to trial, and download rates. And what can you do with this information? Maybe it will help you approach this kind of problems with rising customer acquisition costs in the future. So pick your target KPI based on the bottlenecks you're already aware of in your product data, in your product analytics, or maybe some peer knowledge that gets shared. I think in different communities, developers are very open about sharing their benchmarks and their conversion rates. And also think about the how well have you already optimized different KPIs, because maybe you have already reached the point of diminishing returns. So in this case, it might make sense to switch your attention to a different metric. And after this, just like with the viral loops or literally maybe any other loop optimization, I would recommend to build, again, a simple model which will have different KPIs inside, and then plan scenarios of how these KPIs can be moved to see which of them will have the highest impact on your outcome. typically D30 revenue, let's say, or maybe lifetime value-based revenue. Yeah, here you can see the example of how my simple spreadsheet looks like. It can be much more advanced. It can also include different top funnel metrics like CPMs, click-through rates, etc. But it's a start. And yeah, now I'm gonna ask one more poll question. After listening to this, which growth loop do you believe would be the most effective for your app? Virality-based, content-based, hybrid? Please vote. Maybe 30 more seconds before we look at the answers. Hybrid, 46%. Then content-based, interesting. Not the typical choice I usually see. And the last one is virality-based, which might work best only for 15% of the audience. Thanks a lot for sharing. And finishing up, I hope this gave you some maybe fresh ideas and perspectives about the growth loops. And pretty much the most popular one is anyways the paid user acquisition loop. And as we have seen by now, click-through rate is one of the key levers there. So I'm gonna now give the virtual microphone to Arthur, who will tell us everything about how you get the most out of optimizing for click-through rates and make them the highest possible.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Thank you for these great insights you have shared with us. It's really interesting. And as Ekaterina have already told, I would share more insights with you about creative testing, especially in the privacy-centric era. So as Ekaterina have already mentioned about paid user acquisition, having good or actually a low cost per clicks and cost per install are the ultimate goal all of us want to have. And during this optimization, creative has the focal and main role here. And I will get back here why it's like that. Before that, some short information about me. I'm UA team lead here in Admiral Media. I manage total budgets of more than 25 M on paid campaigns with about more than 4 years experience in UA. I've done extensive app marketing for various sectors, games, subscription-based apps, I mean, revenue-based apps and so on, ad revenue-based apps. And I'm a hard worker, which is kind of my personality. Okay, about the agenda today, we'll start with why creatives got prominent role in UA. Then we will switch to post-scan challenges we have for creative testing, the factors we should consider, and the main questions we should tackle. And then we will deep dive into more details there, and we'll share some expert tips with you, which I think is the most favorite part based on the insights that we have for the presentation. So why creatives got prominent role in UA? First, a lot of competition in paid UA. You can see in most of the categories because of the incrementality effect the paid UA has on organic growth as well these days. So the apps that don't have that paid UA as part of their growth, they are somehow not getting high rankings there, not getting good growth there, which is considerable for an app to resist in the market. Products are getting similar features to each other by time. You can see that the best and most favorable features by the products are getting cloned very fast by their competitors. And that means that the unique sales proposition or point that we have for each app would not take much time to be unique. It would be cloned very fast. There are many examples you can see in the market, like all the e-commerce apps, all the, for example, travel apps. In all the categories, you see they are getting in the same features, having the same features at the end of the day. Ad networks themselves moving very fast toward algorithm first structure, which is, you have heard about this, like Advantage Plus campaigns, smart campaigns, and so on and so forth, or UAC and so on, which are the campaigns that only needs creatives and copies from you to do the magic through algorithm. So, and that is what brings creatives to be the game changer for your paid UA and for optimizing your cost per clicks and cost per, at the end of the day, cost per installs. Post-scan challenges. For Scan Network, actually, I can see most of the audience here is, they are UA managers. They for sure know about Scan and what is it. Is an Apple's API-based privacy-centric framework for attribution and ad measurement, specifically for iOS platform. With the main characteristic and challenges that we have there about the delayed report that we have about like 24 to 72 hours in some cases, heavy investment that should be done on campaign level to pass the Apple privacy threshold defined for different ad networks. It's based on the ad network. On campaign level, you should have minimum installs to be able to get all the postbacks from Scan Network. And the modeling data for ad networks and MMPs, especially on creative level, which is something that we should rely on with blind eyes, if that is the most accurate case that we can have. So that's one-way trust that we should have through this modeled data, which is again challenging thing. Mostly for the UA managers, and I can see in the clients that we have, their UA managers and marketing managers, creative testing for iOS is being done through two extreme options, which choosing between them is becoming dilemma. One is going for a tier 4, like cheaper market with Android OS and having the install as main optimization event there. And then by just considering the number of ads per week that we want to, or number of assets per week that we want to test, and weekly results per asset, which is based on some ad networks. There are best practices there that they can share with you. You are coming to the monthly cost that you should invest for this sake. Actually, here the average CPI is playing a main role here, so you should have some insight about that market. On the next extreme, we can see that they want the test to be done on the main market, or maybe with the main event they want to do the optimization towards. So in this case, it could be like United States as a prominent market with iOS OS itself, and the subscription. For example, this is an example. It could be a middle to a low funnel event, or as I've told you, the main event that we want to do the optimization toward. I mean, at the end of the day, that is the goal of the campaign. And again, if we just assume that we will have these 10 assets per week to test, and again, by considering the CPA, the historical CPA that we have in that market, we will come to a very, very high price for a monthly cost that we should invest. And the main questions are a question that is being raised there is, okay, let's going for the first option or the second option. Actually, we are here to say you that let's step back, let's change our approach here because there are a lot of options in between that we can choose from. But for now, we have a poll. It will appear on your screen. Yeah, and that is the question here is, what structure do you use for your creative testing? It's really interesting for me to know what would be the result here. First is fixed budget on each creative, so one ad set, one creative format. The second one is multiple creatives per ad set, split by creative category. The categories could be UGCs, influencers, banners, and different kind of creative categories that we have. Multiple creative per ad set, not split by creative category. That is another option. So like in the mixed way, they are being added in the ad set level, and not testing creatives, adding new creatives directly to business as usual campaigns or ad sets, which is another option that I've had some of UA managers are going for that, especially if you have some concerns regarding the budget that you should allocate to the testing. So yeah, be active here some seconds, and yeah, the results are here. So multiple creatives per asset split by creative category is on the first place. It's really interesting. Fixed budget on each creative and multiple creative per asset not splitted by creative category have somehow the same position here. And about like 8%, yeah, they're not testing creative, just adding there. Yeah, I know about that. I know that phenomenon. So that's really interesting. If we go to the question that we should tackle, so the step here is the questions that we should tackle here to know what scenario is going or what methodology would work better for us, or what factor we should consider in that methodology. First is affordability, actually. How much you can afford for testing, and if that budget is being provided constantly to you. So maybe it's just like you would have that budget on first 2 months, and after that there would be no budget for testing. That is really interesting factor to consider. How many assets could you deliver per week? So that is another interesting and very important point that you should consider for just coming into more into the structure and the budget that you should allocate there. UGC, influencer, animation, statics, etc. I mean, different categories of creatives you would have, and if they would be provided at the same time to you, or no, it would be provided in the batches maybe to you. So that is very important, and at the end of the day, objective is again important. So I can see some UA managers have that instinct to getting insight for each creative instead of just putting creatives in the ad set literally and have the winner one. For some cases, it is understandable if the video production cost is really high, for example, the influencers. So the UA managers want to be sure that with that specific video did not work or for sure will work for them. So in that case, they are eager to just put this fixed budget on the creative level, but for the most of the cases, as we have seen in the poll, it's not. So here we should actually, after answering these 3 questions, should deep dive in more details. So based on the insights that we have, you should have this option being chosen between ad level spent or multiple ads in an ad set. We should choose between the channels, OS, and geos that we want the test to be done on. Optimization event that should be chosen here. Average, CPI or CPA based on these insights that you have here. So you should have some insight there as well based on your historical data or data available in the markets. Number of assets per testing period, which, as I've told you, is again very, very important point to consider. Results per asset or asset group, which is mainly defined based on best practices on that special ad network. And then at the end of the year, you estimate the cost and compare it with your budget. So all these questions, the main pillar question and the detailed questions, are getting you to the budget that you want to allocate. And if this budget, is okay to go, then you're really happy, you can go there and start the test. If not, you should get back to 3 pillar questions, again, main questions, and start restructuring and reassigning that questions to you and getting into a different structure, which would be comparable with your budget. There is no right or wrong answer as I've written, just different approaches that fit each situation better. Okay, there's another poll time. Actually, I love these poll times, really. Which, you can see the question on your screen. Which aspect of creative testing do you find the most challenging? Creating diverse ad creatives continuously, or actually producing diverse ad creatives continuously, analyzing performance data, testing new formats and categories, and generating actionable insights. Which is the most challenging for you? Actually, I'm really interested in the answer because I have 2 items here as my assumptions for taking the most votes, but not sure which one will win. So, voila. Oh, creating diverse ad creatives continuously. That is the most challenging part. Really interesting. 50%, about 50% of the audience just vote on it. It's really interesting. And on the second place is generating actionable insights. And that's really interesting. Analyzing performance data and testing new formats or categories is in the last place. This is really interesting. I actually, to be honest, didn't thinking for these results here. So this is the most actually favorite part that I know most of you are really interested to cover. The pro tips. The pro tips that we have is for iOS testing is, mainly based on the early signals that we can have. As I've told you, we have this delay on data, so early signals are very important. CTR is what is most famous and lovely one to choose the winner from. The caveat here is that there are some high CTR creatives that have low conversion rates, and that is a really tricky thing because we have that experience that we are choosing that high CTR ones, and high CTR ones are being favored by most of the ad networks for getting more spend. And after some days, considering the delays that you have on scan, you will find that you have spent much money on a creative that has only that has a high CTR, but the conversion rate is low, let alone the cost per action. There are a lot of examples in the market that this is somewhat tricky, but again, it is one of the very important KPIs that you can rely on. And in some cases, it will work actually. So the other option here is just for early signal having 3-second video view to impression ratio, or 50-75% video view to impression ratio, which is known as the hook rate and hold rate in the UA industry. which is again very interesting metrics and very important metrics in case of the videos that will work and actually for detecting the hooks of the creatives that are performing well and replicating them in other new creatives that you want to create or the creative team would create. But it actually only works for videos. A lot of successes there. Also, it's not 100% guarantee that this would be the best winner. The third option is the cost-effective option, running campaign for some days after creatives getting some good amount of impression or necessary amount of impression. Then you decide to then you will pause them and we'll wait like the rest 2-3 days just for the delayed postbacks to come, and then you will judge about the results. But the caveat here is again the long waiting time that you should have, the time that you are spending money, and the time that you should wait at least like 3 days to be sure that you have enough data there by average. The other option that I've seen recently in market that's very popular is using Meta. Actually, this one is only for Meta aggregated event measurement, which is the real-time magic as told by Meta team. Based on the experience and the tests, it works good. The data is reliable. However, you should test it yourself. The caveat here is, again, you should wait for your account. I mean, just running the scan campaigns there and wait for your account to be, for this specific feature to be unlocked for you and available, and your account be compliant with AEM. And just after that, you can use this modeling from Meta, which is, as I've told you, reliable, but however, every item here has its own risk, so you should do your tests and get sure that everything is working here. For web campaigns, I've seen this method, again, which is a cost-effective method. It has its caveat. What is this method about? Creating a web traffic campaign. And put the one link or tracker from MMP, which is actually the landing page is would be the App Store URL into this campaign, and then run the campaign. The campaign would be cheaper, but again, there's attribution problem here, so that is the caveat here, which again make it not 100% accurate, but I've seen this method also being used in the market. So this is another thing you can test. And the other dilemma here, fair test or algorithm magic. Actually, fair test is that one creative per ad set, literally, and the algorithm magic is when you put in, I mean, some creatives, depending on the best practice of that ad network, into one ad set and let algorithm decide what is the winner. So I prefer my algorithm magic, and it seems that most of the audience have preferred it based on the poll. And my reasoning behind it is that fair test is not really fair. So when we are telling fair, okay, one creative or per one ad set, again, algorithm is doing its work on each creative by delivering it to different demographic groups, different placements, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, this is not fairly test or fair test as it's being told. Again, if you have a winner in fair test, you should then transfer the winner creative to the main BAU campaign that you have, and then this creative should again compete based on algorithm magic. So there is no way you can just escape from algorithm magic. That is how it should work. And at the end of the day, actually, it is cheaper. So you have a winner, then you just take that winner to the main campaign, and you just stop testing there or test another batch of creatives. This is it for now. Thank you very much. I think we can start the Q&A session. Let's see. Actually, Ekaterina, we can go with your questions if you want to answer the questions that we have here. Ladies first at the end of the day.
Thanks, Arthur. I've already answered the questions in the written form. Please, dear audience, let me know if this matches your expectations and answers your questions. If you have some follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them live as well. I see 2 questions left for me for now. How can businesses identify and leverage their unique growth loops? Here, probably also a very common sense approach that I take. You look into your users, you talk to them, by doing user research, you can already get an idea of whether your app whether there's this natural desires that they have, for example, for sharing your app or sharing the content of your app. For example, you might have a feature, or at Mimo, we have a feature where users would build the playgrounds, where they would build their own projects. However, they have to be proud and very happy with the outcome to share these projects publicly. So it's your job as a product manager or owner to actually make sure that the experience is good and matches their expectations. If this is not happening, if you have a feeling that it's not happening, and 5 out of 10 users are going to tell you, I don't feel like sharing this because it looks lame, because I'm not proud of it, then you already know that maybe the content sharing loop for this particular feature will not be a good idea. So I would say user research, you can really identify a lot of interesting things there. You can also look into the competition peers of products that are similar to yours to see what works for them. It's not going to make your loop unique, but it's going to give you an idea of what might work. And then for me, also the main goal here is to not necessarily end up with one unique loop, which would be great, but with a collection of micro loops that make your product much better defensible and makes it much harder to copy for the competition. So I hope this works, but let me know what you think. And another question, which tactic area, viral loop, content loop, paid loop, has been most effective in generating growth for Mimo? Is the vertical too niche for the first 2 to really take off? I would say yes. Like short answer, it's a bit too niche. It would work much better for a language app, for a fitness app, simply because your addressable market is much larger. Back in the days when we were launching and experimenting with the loops, the goal was to bring down the blended customer acquisition cost. So honestly, every download and every purchase that would come from there would work really good and still help us in the short term. But if I would have to invest much more effort into like creating these loops, I would still say that content is a much more promising one. And one more question about the referral program. How can you test an MVP of a referral program without involving the product or tech teams? Is there any platform or something that can give us some ideas that can be successful before we develop it? These platforms exist, but honestly, I don't have experience with them. And I never tried create a referral program in the product without involving the tech or product teams, simply because you would want to also have the proper like tracking functionalities in there and try to see like the results of your program. So you need to find a way for this downloads to be properly attributed. But I do think these platforms exist. Maybe the easiest option would also be just to advertise this referral program through emails and see what is roughly the invite rate is going to be. But again, this will probably still lead to you not being able to measure every little detail of this endeavor. But I think sending them through the emails just to check roughly the response, the reaction might still make sense. The last one, what is meant by blended customer acquisition cost? So this is the customer acquisition cost, which includes where you take your spend and all the money you spent on advertising and divide it by all the purchases you got, not only those that you got from these paid advertising channels, but also organics and whatever other channels you are using, like partnerships, content marketing, etc. Yep. I think these are all the questions for myself.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. Actually, yeah, I can see some other questions here for creative testing. What are some common misconceptions or myths about creative testing, and how can businesses overcome them? There are a lot of them, actually. I've mentioned some, like the highest CTR one is always the winner. If a creative is another item would be if a creative is a clear winner in one market, for sure, they're confident that it would be winner in other markets as well for the same language. Or the other one is if the creative is winner in like Germany, it would be a winner in Spain as well. If you just translate it to Spanish and do the voiceover, it will work there as well. The other thing is if one creative is working good in one ad network, it will again work good in other network as well. A lot of myths there, actually. And at the end of the day, it comes to a big no. And a test would be required for us to know if that would work or not. Answer from our side. I mean, the list is extensive here. Alvaro, yeah, you have asked about it. We can add, for example, if a creative is working good in iOS, for sure it would work for Android as well, and so on and so forth. So this is extensive, and overcoming them is only by testing. I mean, there's no other option there. Again, get back to the pillar questions. Define the budget that you want for testing creatives and go on with that, if that is answer to your question. Other thing here that I can find for my side would be creative testing. Yeah, creative testing, what is your usual next step when you finish creative testing? Do you keep them running within the test ad set, or you would stop that ad set and move it to the ad set that is running with winners from before? Okay, I got what is the gist here, because the text is pretty long. So actually, yes, if we have a winner creative there in the asset, the winner creative would be transferred instantly to the main BAU campaign. That is what it worked for me, and I've done like that. Only point here is that we should have in mind to not disrupt, because whenever you are just adding this new creative, you're disrupting this learning process. You should not disrupt the campaign learning so much. So you should gather the winner creatives and add them as batches, like once a week. It depends to the ad network best practices. So that is the answer here. I've tried to be very clear about the answer here. If I would again put them in another asset, put the winners in other ad set and would make them again compete to each other, no. I mean, second time competition would not be in my agenda for sure. Do you recommend to test creatives for iOS or just on Android and then use the winner from the Android and the iOS campaign? That is the, I think, point that I considered. It is not the scenario always that iOS winner creatives are working on Android and vice versa. So if we are going for the cheaper scenario, if you remember from the beginning slides that I've shared, to go for Android and then just be sure that it will work, that winner creative would work well on iOS. That would not be the case in most of the cases, or maybe would be the case. However, there is a big risk there. It's up to you to test if that is what it works. But again, based on the insights that I have, the user behavior, the Android user behavior and the iOS user behaviors are not the same. So in most of the cases, there is no yes or no answer to this question. It's just a matter of testing. That makes sense. And yeah, actually, I was waiting for this question. We are out of time, actually, but I think we have, can we go with a couple of minutes, Ekaterina, more for, covering the questions? If any question is not covered, I will try to type the answer after the session. So when launching new creatives, how long should I let them run and how many conversions should I aim for? For different ad networks is different. The main point here is just to have enough impression, which for some cases, actually it's an extensive thing. I'm trying to just very briefly answer to keeping time. It seems that we need another, let's start just for this creative thing. Creative testing thing. So depending on the impression for some ad networks, it could mainly it should not be less than 10,000 impressions. For some cases 20 even to 40,000 impressions are being advised for some ad networks to detect the clear winner there. And again, for how many conversion, it depends to that specific ad network, that how many conversion would be needed. There are documentation there. There are a lot of resources you can have, or you can refer for how many conversions should you aim for that specific creative. And there are other effects there as well that you should take into consideration, just like breakdown effect for Meta, which is very known because these algorithms at the beginning days, you see good results, good CPIs for one creative, but then you can see that Meta starts spending on the other creative and you don't know why. And the reasoning there is that the algorithm take the pace into consideration. So the algorithm can detect that day by day, the CPI start raising for one creative and start decreasing for other creatives. So at the end of the day, I mean, the second creative, which in the first, for example, 3 days, you know that it has the less CPI and would be winner. After a week, it would not be the winner, and so on and so forth. So again, it's mainly based and very relevant to that specific ad network. How do you test if your creative strategy is working? Really easily. It should work. Actually, the result is, I mean, the bottom line is, if that is how it works, I mean, if the winner creative you are getting into the main campaign and it start to compete with the best creatives there, by having the same KPI, so you are in a right route and you can just go with that strategy. If not, the strategy should be revamped and changed. So I think we are okay with the okay, yeah, we have two new questions here. Do you test the creative for a broad audience? No, I'm not doing the creative testing for the broad audience, because at the end of the day, the audience that I would target have specific behavior, and I want to know their behavior about my or their engagement about my creative. So I'm doing the proper targeting as far as I can for that creative testing. And creative testing, what would be your go-to practice for iOS testing due to SCAD? Actually, this answer would be really long here, but I think I've covered most of it in the presentation. By the way, the presentation would be shared in our website as well, in Admiral Media. So you can just refer to it again and go through the presentation and just cover the points that you have not or isn't you have just missed maybe during the presentation. So due to SCAD, you should rely on the early signals that I have depicted them in the pro comments or pro tips that we have for the in the last slide. So yeah, it seems we are done here. Thank you very much. I think I've covered most of the questions here. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll share the presentation via email as well. So stay tuned for upcoming episodes. Thank you very much, Ekaterina, for joining this presentation. And thank you all for being the audience till this moment and for questions, actually. So thank you and see you in our next session and episodes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.